The Great Hall of Axiom Prime had never been so full. Representatives from 847 civilizations filled the enormous chamber, their bodies of every shape and size imaginable. Some floated in liquid tanks. Others stood on mechanical legs. A few existed only as light projections from distant worlds. They had all come for one purpose: to decide the fate of Earth. Ambassador Q Dae-sung stood at the human platform, small circular space barely large enough for 3 people. He had served the Galactic Assembly for 30 years. He had watched humanity struggle to earn respect among species that were ancient when humans still lived in caves. Today he knew all that struggle would mean nothing. High Counselor Lyra of the Keth Dominion rose to speak. She was tall and silver-skinned, with 4 arms that moved gracefully as she addressed the chamber. Her voice carried the weight of a civilization that had ruled its sector for 10,000 years. Humanity is a danger, Lyra said. In 120 years of membership, they have expanded faster than any species in recorded history. They breed without limits. They consume resources without thought. They solve problems with violence when patience would serve better. We gave them a chance to prove themselves worthy of galactic society. They have failed. Dae-sung listened without expression. He had heard these arguments before. They were not entirely wrong, which made them impossible to defeat. I propose full exile, Lyra continued. Humanity will be confined to their home system. They will have 90 cycles to withdraw all their people from galactic space. After that, any human found beyond the Sol system will be subject to containment. This is not punishment. This is protection for them, and for us. The chamber hummed with approval. Dae-sung could see it in the movement of bodies, the flickering of lights. The subtle signals that each species used to show agreement. The vote had not happened yet, but it was already decided. Speaker Vel, leader of the assembly, turned toward the human platform. Vel was ancient beyond measure, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline shell. The speaker had watched civilizations rise and fall for longer than humans had existed as a species. The representative of Earth may respond, Vel said. Dae-sung stepped forward. He had prepared a speech full of facts and figures, evidence of humanity's contributions to galactic society. He had planned to mention the medical advances humans had developed, the art they had created, the peace treaties they had helped negotiate. But looking out at the vast chamber, he knew none of it would matter. We came to you as children, Dae-sung said quietly. We asked only to learn, to grow, to find our place among you. Everything we did because we wanted to belong. If our energy seemed aggressive, it was only because we were eager. If our expansion seemed threatening, it was only because we were curious. We meant no harm. He paused, looking directly at Lyra. But I see now that it does not matter what we meant. It matters only what you believe. You have already decided what humanity is. Nothing I say will change that. The chamber was silent, so I will say only this. Dae-sung continued. Remember this moment. Remember that we asked for understanding and received exile. Remember that we offered friendship and received fear. Whatever happens next, remember that you chose this path, not us. He stepped back. There was nothing more to say. The vote was called. 847 civilizations voted in favor of exile. 12 abstained, small, young species who knew they might be next. None voted against. Humanity was alone. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. Dae-sung spent most of it in silence, staring out at the stars that humanity would soon be forbidden to visit. He thought about his daughter, who had been born on a colony. World and had never seen Earth, he thought. About the millions of humans scattered across the galaxy who would now be forced to abandon their homes. When his ship finally entered Earth's atmosphere, Dae-sung felt a strange calmness. The anger and sadness had faded, replaced by something harder and colder. He had failed to save humanity's place in the galaxy. But perhaps failure was not the end. Perhaps it was only the beginning of something else. The Shadow Council met in a bunker beneath the mountains of what had once been called Nabunze. There were 7 people in the room, and together they controlled every secret humanity possessed. Admiral Tae Woojin sat at the head of the table, his face like stone. Dr. Hannah Soo Young sat to his right, her eyes moving constantly as her mind calculated possibilities. The others were military commanders, intelligence chiefs, scientists who had spent their lives preparing for the worst. Daesong told them everything. The chamber, the words of Lyra, and the silence of 847 civilizations. When he finished, no one spoke for a long time. Finally, Admiral Tay leaned forward. "They believe we are dangerous," he said. "They believe we are violent and reckless and incapable of patience. They have decided this without evidence, based only on their fear of what we might become." He looked around the table. "They are wrong about us. But they have also given us no choice. If they will not let us live in peace, then we must find another way to survive." Dr. Hannah opened a folder and placed it on the table. The words on the cover were simple: Protocol Silence. 80 years ago, she said, the first human scientists who studied galactic society reached a conclusion. They realized that older civilizations would always fear younger ones. They predicted that one day humanity would face exactly this situation. So they began to plan. She opened the folder. Protocol Silence is not a weapon. It is a doctrine, a way of fighting without fighting. A war that cannot be seen until it is already over. Admiral Tay stood. "The galaxy has voted to exile us. They expect us to accept our punishment quietly. They expect us to fade away into irrelevance while they continue their ancient games of power." His voice was calm, almost gentle. "They have made a mistake. Not because we are violent, but because they have forgotten that patience can be a weapon too. They have given us 90 cycles to withdraw. They think that is a deadline. But it is actually a gift. It is time to prepare." He looked at each face around the table. "We will not fight them with ships and weapons. We will not give them the war they expect. Instead, we will become something they cannot exile. We will become essential. We will weave ourselves so deeply into the fabric of their land. Civilization that removing us would destroy everything they have." Built Daesong stared at the Admiral. "That could take generations," he said. Admiral Tay nodded.
"Yes, it will."
"Humanity has been preparing for this moment for 80 years. We are prepared to wait 80 more. Or 800. However long it takes." He turned toward the door. "The galaxy voted to exile Earth. Today humanity declares war. But it will be a silent war. A war of patience. A war they will not even know they are losing until the day they wake up and realize they cannot live without us." The door closed behind him. The silent war had begun. 6 months after the exile vote, the galaxy watched humanity leave. Cargo ships filled with families departed from colony worlds. Research stations shut down. Trading posts closed their doors. News broadcasts across 1,000 planets showed the same images: humans packing their belongings, saying goodbye to alien friends, boarding vessels bound for the Sol system. The galaxy was pleased. The human problem had been solved peacefully. There was no war, no violence, no need for the combined fleets to enforce the exile. Humanity had accepted their punishment with quiet dignity. Within a few years, most species had already begun to forget that humans had ever been part of galactic society. They did not know that everything they saw was a performance. Captain Unigina stood on the bridge of the Voidwalker, watching the stars through a viewport that should not have existed. Her ship was invisible, not just hidden, but theoretically impossible. It used technology that humanity had developed in secret over 60 years. Technology that broke rules the galaxy did not even know could be broken. The Voidwalker had no official name. It appeared in no registry. As far as the galaxy knew, it did not exist. And it was not alone. 200 ships just like it moved through galactic space, like ghosts, carrying crews who had volunteered to disappear from human records entirely. Phase 1 is complete, Lieutenant C.O. Kelman reported from his station. He was young, barely 30, but his mind worked faster than most computers. We have seeded dormant programs into the data networks of 214 major worlds. 0 detection. 0 anomalies. Yuna nodded. And the Keth convoy? Intercepted and modified. We replaced 0.003% of their navigation code with our own. The change is so small that their systems read it as normal variation. They will never know it is there until we need them to know. Yes, Captain. Until then, Yuna turned back to the viewport. Somewhere out there, visible ships filled with visible humans were leaving galactic space forever. Here, in the darkness between stars, the real work was just beginning. On the Mora homeworld, a woman named Narayunbai walked through a market filled with alien vendors. She had lived among the Mora for 40 years. She had learned their language, adopted their customs, built relationships with their leaders. She had married a Mora male and raised children who were half human, half alien. To everyone who knew her, she was simply a human who had chosen to stay, one of the few exceptions allowed. And are the Exile rules? No one knew that Nari was Earth's most valuable agent. For 4 decades, she had gathered information. Not secrets or weapons or military plans, those were obvious targets, too well protected. Instead, she collected something far more valuable: understanding. She learned how the Mora thought, what they feared, where their systems were strong, and where they were weak. She mapped the invisible architecture of their society with a patience that would have seemed inhuman to anyone who did not know her true purpose. Today, she completed her greatest mission. Using access codes she had spent 20 years earning, Nari copied the entire architecture of the Mora planetary defense grid. Every protocol, every backup system, every emergency procedure. She did not steal it or damage it or leave any trace of her presence. She simply made a copy, encrypted it in a way no Mora computer could detect, and transmitted it to a location that did not officially exist. Then she went home, cooked dinner for her family, and waited. Her work was done. She would not hear from Earth for years, perhaps decades. But she knew that when the time came, her 40 years of patience would matter, back on Earth. Dr. Hannah Soo Young stood before the Shadow Council with a holographic map of the galaxy floating above the table. Thousands of tiny lights blinked across its surface, each one representing a piece of the silent war. Protocol Silence has 3 phases, she explained. Phase 1 is seeding. We plant ourselves into their systems, not to damage them, but to become part of them. Small programs that do nothing except exist. Code that looks like normal variation. Connections that seem random but are actually carefully designed. She touched the map, and the lights changed color. Phase 2 is growing. The seeds we plant will slowly expand, connecting to each other, building networks within networks. Still invisible, still harmless, but spreading like roots beneath the surface. Another touch, and the map transformed again. Phase 3 is becoming essential. Once we are deep enough, we begin to make ourselves necessary. We improve their systems slightly. We fix problems they did not know they had. We make everything work just a little bit better, and we make sure that our code is the reason why. Admiral Tay studied the map. How long until Phase 3? 3 to 5 years for the first targets, 10 to 15 years for full integration across major systems, 20 to 30 years for complete dependency. And if they discover us before then? Hannah smiled. They will not. We are not hiding from them. We are becoming them. You cannot find something that looks exactly like everything else. The Admiral nodded slowly. And the economic operations? A new face appeared on the screen. Dr. Mina Wari, commander of Humanity's Economic Warfare Division. She operated from a station hidden in the asteroid belt, surrounded by the most powerful financial computers ever built. We have established 10,000 shell companies across 90 species, Mina reported. Each company is small, unremarkable, owned by aliens who do not know they are working for us. Together, they have already acquired 12% of the galactic rare mineral market. We project 30% within 2 years. Will the market notice? No. The purchases are too small and too spread out. No single transaction is significant. But together they give us control over resources the galaxy cannot function without. Admiral Tay was silent for a long moment. Around the table, the leaders of humanity's silent war waited. 80 years ago, he finally said, "Our ancestors looked at the galaxy and saw the truth. They saw that we would never be accepted as equals. They saw that our energy and our ambition would always be seen as threats. And they made a choice. They chose to prepare for a war that might not come for generations." He stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the blue marble of Earth floating in space. Those ancestors are gone now. Most of them died without ever knowing if their work would matter. They spent their lives building something they would never see completed. That is the kind of patience the galaxy does not believe we possess. He turned back to face the council. We are not conquerors. We do not want to rule the galaxy or destroy it. We want only what we have always wanted: to live, to grow, to find our place among the stars. The galaxy has told us we cannot have that. So we will take it in a way they cannot stop. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. We are becoming the floor they stand on, the air they breathe, the systems they depend on. And one day, when they finally see what we have done, they will understand something important. He paused. They will understand that the war is already over, and they lost it without ever knowing it was being fought. The lights of Earth glowed behind him. In the darkness of space, 200 ghost ships continued their work. On 100 worlds, human agents lived invisible lives, gathering and building and waiting. In computer networks across the galaxy, tiny programs grew like seeds in spring soil. The silent war had no battles. It had no heroes or villains. It had only patience, generation after generation of patience, building toward a future that was still decades away. Humanity had learned something that the ancient civilizations had forgotten. War was not always loud. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it was invisible. And sometimes the most powerful weapon was simply the willingness to wait. 2 years after the Exile, the Keth Dominion experienced something impossible. Their food distribution network or system that had operated perfectly for 3,000 years simply stopped working. Not damaged. Not attacked. It just forgot how to function. For 72 hours, cargo ships sat motionless in space. Processing plants shut down. Billions of Keth citizens waited for food that did not arrive. Panic spread across 40 worlds. Emergency supplies were rushed from military reserves. Government officials demanded answers. The engineers found nothing. Every system checked out perfectly. Every code line was exactly where it should be. There was no virus, no malfunction, no explanation. And then, just as suddenly as it had stopped, the network started working again. Food began flowing. Ships began moving. Everything returned to normal, as if the failure had never happened. The official report called it an unexplained anomaly. The engineers were told to monitor the systems more carefully. Life continued, but on a small moon orbiting the Keth homeworld, an analyst named Bren sat alone in his office, staring at data that made no sense. Bren was not important. He had no power, no influence, no connection to the great decisions of the Dominion. His job was simply to look for patterns in usual activity that might indicate threats. Most days, he found nothing. But today, something was wrong. The food network failure was not alone. Bren had found others. Small things easily ignored. A communication satellite that transmitted garbage data for 6 minutes before correcting itself. A mining operation that reported impossible resource numbers for a single shift. A military transport that took a route no algorithm would ever choose, then returned to normal without anyone noticing. Each incident was tiny. Each had been dismissed as random error. But Bren saw what no one else was looking for. They had all started happening after the human exile. He began to dig deeper. He requested records from other sectors, other systems, other worlds. What he found made his blood run cold. In 18 months, there had been 2,847 unexplained anomalies. Across 340 worlds, communication failures, navigation errors, power fluctuations, data corruption that fixed itself, each one small, each one ignored, each one leaving no trace, and they were getting more frequent. Bren wrote a classified report. He sent it to his superiors with a simple conclusion. Something was happening. Something invisible. Something intentional. And it had started exactly when humanity left galactic space. His superiors read the report and filed it away. The idea that exiled humans could be responsible for thousands of invisible attacks across hundreds of worlds was absurd. Humanity did not have that capability. No one did. Bren returned to his office and continued watching. He was patient. Eventually, someone would listen, far across the galaxy. Commander Sung Ji-ho led a team of 12 humans through the corridors of an abandoned research station. The station had belonged to Earth's Wanza facility for studying alien biology. After the exile, it had been seized by the Mora Collective and stripped of everything valuable. But the Mora had missed something. "It is still here," one of Sung's team members reported, running a scanner over a section of wall that looked like every other section. "Hidden compartment, exactly where the records said it would be." Sung nodded. "Open it." The wall slid apart, revealing a small chamber filled with data crystals. These crystals contained decades of research knowledge that humanity had developed and hidden, knowing that one day they might need to reclaim it. "Copy everything," Sung ordered. "Leave the originals in place, sir. We are not thieves. We take copies only. And when we leave, we will add a small gift." The team worked quickly and silently. They copied the data, then placed a single additional crystal among the originals. The crystal looked identical to the others, but it contained something extra, a program that would slowly integrate itself into any system that accessed the research. The Mora would find the research eventually. They would study it, use it, build upon it. And hidden in their work, invisible and patient, humanity's gift would wait. Sung's team departed the way they had arrived, through paths that did not appear on any map, in a ship that did not exist, leaving no evidence they had ever been there. Back on Earth, Dr. Mina Worry watched economic data flow across her screens. 3 years of quiet work had produced remarkable results. Through 10,000 shell companies, humanity now controlled 31% of the galactic rare mineral market. They owned shares in manufacturing facilities, shipping lines, and technology firms. They had financial interests in every major sector of galactic commerce. None of it was visible. The companies were owned by aliens. The transactions were processed by alien banks. The profits flowed through alien accounts. On paper, humanity had nothing. But when Mina pressed certain buttons, she could see the truth. A vast web of invisible connections, all leading back to Earth. Resources that the galaxy thought it controlled were actually responding to human decisions. Markets that seemed free were subtly shaped by human hands. "We are not trying to own the galaxy," Mina had explained to the Shadow Council. "We are trying to make the galaxy unable to function without us. There is a difference." The difference was important. Ownership could be taken away. Dependency could not. On the Mora homeworld, Agent Nari Yunbai celebrated her 44th year of service with a quiet dinner with her family. Her Mora husband and half-human children did not know what she truly was. They thought she was simply a human who had found a home among aliens. One of the lucky few who had been allowed to stay after the exile, Nari had not contacted Earth in 3 years. She did not need to. Her work was complete. The information she had gathered over for decades was already being used in ways she would never see. The defense grid architectures she had copied were being studied, analyzed, and incorporated into humanity's plans. The relationships she had built were opening doors that would have taken decades to unlock any other way. She was 62 years old now. She would probably never return to Earth. Her children would grow up as Mora citizens, perhaps never knowing their mother's true history. But that was acceptable. The mission was more important than any individual life. One day, grandchildren might live in a galaxy where humanity was respected instead of feared. That was worth any sacrifice. In his office on the Keth Moon, Investigator Bren finally got the attention he had been seeking. Speaker Vel, ancient leader of the Galactic Assembly, had received his report. The speaker had questions. Bren presented his findings. 2,847 anomalies, 340 affected worlds, a pattern that could not be coincidence. "You believe the humans are responsible," Speaker Vel said. It was not a question. "I do not know," Bren admitted. "I only know that something is happening. Something invisible. And it started when humanity left. Humanity is contained within their home system. They have no ships in our space. No agents on our worlds. No access to our networks. That is what we believe, yes." Speaker Vel was silent for a long moment. The ancient being had watched civilizations rise and fall for longer than most species had existed. Very little surprised Vel anymore. But this report was troubling. Not because of what it said, but because of what it implied. If Bren was right, then humanity had been conducting invisible operations across the galaxy for years. That would require capabilities far beyond what anyone believed humans possessed. It would require agents who had been in place for decades. It would require technology that could hide from every detection system known to exist. It would require planning that had begun long before the Exile vote, for the first time in 800 years. Speaker Vel felt something unfamiliar stir in the ancient consciousness. Fear. "Continue your investigation," Vel said finally. "Report everything you find. An investigator tell no one else about this." "Not yet." Bren nodded and left. Speaker Vel remained alone in the great chamber of Axiom Prime, surrounded by silence and the weight of terrible possibility. The galaxy had voted to exile humanity because they feared what humans might become. Now Vel wondered if they should have feared what humans already were. For years after the exile, the Galactic Assembly gathered for an emergency session. Reports of anomalies had grown impossible to ignore. Food systems, transportation networks, communication grids failures were happening everywhere now, hundreds per day, each one small, but together, forming a pattern that even the most skeptical could no longer deny. Something was wrong with the galaxy, and no one knew what it was. Speaker Vel called the session to order. 846 civilizations had sent representatives, all but humanity, who were no longer permitted to attend. High Counselor Lyra had prepared a speech about increasing security measures and forming investigation committees. The bureaucracy of fear was ready to grind into motion. Then every screen in the chamber went dark. For 19 minutes, nothing worked. Communication systems across the entire galaxy failed simultaneously. Ships hung motionless in space. Stations went silent. Governments lost contact with their fleets, their colonies, their people. For 19 minutes, the galaxy experienced what it would feel like to be truly alone. When the systems returned, a single message appeared on every screen in the chamber. On every screen across every world, on every device capable of displaying text, the message was simple. You voted. We listened. Chaos erupted. Counselor Lyra demanded answers. Military commanders shouted orders. Scientists scrambled to trace the source of the message. But there was nothing to find. The message had come from everywhere and nowhere. It had appeared in systems that should have been impossible to access, written in languages that should have been impossible to know. Speaker Vel raised a hand, and silence fell. "We will respond to this threat directly," the ancient being said. "Assemble a combined fleet from the 12 largest civilizations. We will go to the Sol system and demand an explanation. If humanity has violated the terms of their exile, they will face consequences." Within hours, the fleet was assembled. 3,000 warships from 12 species, carrying enough firepower to destroy 100 worlds. They jumped towards Sol, ready to confront the exiled humans with overwhelming force. They never reached Earth. As the fleet entered the Sol system, their weapon systems went offline. Not damaged, simply off, as if someone had flipped a switch. Navigation failed next, leaving ships drifting without direction. Then life support began cycling down, slowly reducing oxygen levels, dimming lights, lowering temperatures. Through every speaker on every ship, a calm human voice spoke. "Turn around. This is your only warning." The fleet commanders tried to override the shutdowns. Nothing worked. Engineers opened control panels to find their own systems responding to commands they had not given. One captain ordered his crew to manually restart the weapons array. The weapons powered up, then immediately targeted the captain's own bridge before shutting down again. The message was clear. Humanity controlled these ships now. They could destroy the entire fleet without firing a single shot of their own. The fleet turned around, back on Axiom Prime. Investigator Bryn finally presented the full scope of his findings to the assembly. He had been working without sleep for weeks, tracing connections that should not have existed, finding patterns that should have been impossible. 40% of galactic logistics now routes through algorithms originally designed by humans, he reported, his voice hollow with exhaustion. Most species do not know this because the code was introduced gradually over decades, replacing older systems piece by piece. It works better than what it replaced. No one questioned where it came from. He changed the display. 60% of military communication protocols contain dormant human code. It does nothing until it is activated. We have never seen it activate because there has never been a reason to. Until now. The chamber was completely silent. Financial systems, power grids, agricultural networks, transportation hubs, medical databases. Human code is everywhere. Not attacking, not damaging, just existing, waiting. Counselor Lyra rose. This is impossible. We monitored them. We watched their withdrawal. We saw them leave. Saw what they wanted you to see? Bren replied. While visible humans were leaving, invisible humans were arriving. Ships that do not appear on any scanner. Agents who have been in place for decades. Technology that breaks rules we thought were laws of nature. Paused. They have been at war with us for 4 years. We did not notice because it was not a war we recognized. No weapons. No battles. No conquest. Just integration. They made themselves essential to everything we do. And now they are. A screen flickered to life at the front of the chamber. Dr. Hannah Soo Young appeared, broadcasting from a location that no scanner could identify. Good evening, she said calmly. My name is Hannah Soo Young. I speak for Earth. The chamber exploded with noise. Accusations, threats, demands for explanation. Hannah waited patiently until the shouting faded. We did not want this war, she continued. We want Ed to live among you, to learn from you, to grow together. You decided that was unacceptable. You voted to exile us, to contain us, to treat us like a disease that needed to be quarantined. Her expression did not change. So we adapted. We found another way. If you would not let us live among you as guests, we became something else. We became the infrastructure, the foundation, the invisible systems that make your civilizations function. We became something you cannot exile because you cannot survive without it. She leaned forward slightly. Every system you depend on has human fingerprints on it now. Your food production, your transportation, your communications, your economies, your military defenses. We did not conquer any of it. We simply made it better and made sure that we were the reason why. Counselor Lyra spoke through clenched teeth. You cannot threaten us. We have thousands of worlds, trillions of citizens, fleets that could destroy your single planet 1,000 times over. Hannah nodded. Yes, you could destroy Earth. You have that power. But what would happen next? Your fleets would lose navigation. Your food systems would fail. Your communications would go silent. Your economies would collapse. Within a year, your civilizations would tear themselves apart, not because we attacked them, but because they would no longer work. She spread her hands. We are not threatening you. We are explaining reality. You voted to exile us because you feared what we might become. That fear came true. We became essential. And now we are offering you a choice. The screen flickered again, and Admiral Tae Woo Jin appeared beside Hannah. We have not fired a single weapon, he said quietly. We have not taken a single life. The war we fought was invisible because we did not want it to be a war at all. We wanted only to survive. You left us no other option. He looked directly into the camera. We have demonstrated that we can shut down your fleets without casualties. We can disrupt your systems without permanent damage. We have this power, and we have chosen not to use it destructively. That choice should tell you something about who we really are." His voice hardened slightly. "But if you force us to activate everything we have built, your civilizations will end. Not in flames or conquest, but in silence. Your worlds will simply stop working. That is not a threat. That is a fact. The choice of what happens next belongs to you." The screen went dark. In the silence that followed, Speaker Vel spoke for the first time since the revelation began. "How long?" the ancient being asked. "How long have you been preparing for this?" Admiral Tay's voice answered from somewhere unseen. 84 years? Since the first human scientists studied galactic society and understood what would eventually happen. 3 generations of humans have worked toward this moment. Most of them died without ever knowing if their work would matter. They did it anyway. Speaker Vel was quiet for a long moment. "And if we had not exiled you? If the vote had gone differently? Then none of this would have been necessary. The infrastructure we built would have simply remained dormant. We would have been citizens of the galaxy, nothing more. We prepared for war, but we never wanted it." The ancient being nodded slowly. "I believe you," Speaker Vel said. "That makes this even more tragic." On a small ship approaching Earth after 44 years away, Agent Nari Yunbai finally allowed herself to cry. Her mission was complete. Her family thought she was visiting a dying relative, not entirely a lie. She was returning to the world of her birth, a world she had not seen since she was 18 years old. She had given everything for this moment. Her youth, her identity, her connection to her own species. She had raised children who would never know what their mother truly was, but it was done. The war was over, and humanity had won without firing a single shot. When her ship landed on Earth, Admiral Tay was waiting personally to greet her. "Welcome home," he said simply. Nari looked at the blue sky, the green trees, the faces of humans who had never had to hide what they were. "Was it worth it?" she asked. The Admiral considered the question. "Ask me again in 100 years," he said. "When your grandchildren live in a galaxy that respects us." Nari nodded. Perhaps that was the only answer that mattered. The days following the revelation were chaos. Emergency sessions convened across the galaxy as civilizations struggled to understand what humanity had done. Some demanded immediate military action, total war against Earth, regardless of the cost. Others argued for negotiation, recognizing that the cost might be too high to bear, and some simply sat in stunned silence, trying to accept that the species they had dismissed as young and reckless had outplayed them all. On the Keth homeworld, Counselor Lyra faced the consequences of her greatest achievement. She had been the architect of Earth's exile. She had stood before the Assembly and convinced 847 civilizations that humanity was a danger that needed to be contained. She had promised safety. Instead, she had delivered dependency. The crowds outside her residence grew larger each day. Her own people, demanding answers she did not have. Her allies in government, distancing themselves from her decisions. Her rivals, circling like predators, sensing weakness. Within 2 weeks of the revelation, Lyra was removed from power by a vote of her own council. She was not punished. She was simply forgotten, the leader who had tried to exile humanity and accidentally made them essential to galactic civilization. History would remember her as a cautionary tale. Speaker Vel watched these events unfold from the great chamber of Axiom Prime. The ancient being had lived long enough to see many empires rise and fall. This was different. This was not conquest or collapse. This was something new. The humans had not defeated the galaxy. They had transformed their relationship to it. They had taken the exile meant to destroy them and turned it into a weapon more powerful than any fleet. And they had done it without violence, without hatred. Without the destruction that usually accompanied such fundamental changes in power. It was Vel reflected. Almost elegant Captain Yuna Jinna brought the Voidwalker out of hiding for the first time in 4 years. Her ship and its 200 sisters had been ghosts, as invisible and impossible, carrying out the work of protocol silence without recognition or glory. Now, As they revealed themselves to galactic sensors, Yuna felt a strange mixture of pride and loss. The secret was over. The invisible war had become visible, and the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. Her crew gathered on the bridge as they received their new orders from Earth. "We are no longer ghosts," Yuna told them. "We are no longer weapons. From today, we become something else. Ambassadors, representatives, proof that humanity can be trusted with power." She looked at the faces around her people who had given up their identities, their families, their entire lives for a mission that might never have succeeded. "What we did was necessary," she said, "but what comes next is more important. We won the war. Now we have to win the peace." The Voidwalker set course for Axiom Prime, no longer hiding, no longer invisible. A ship that should not have existed, carrying a crew that had sacrificed everything, returning to claim the future they had fought for. In the data networks of the galaxy, something else emerged from hiding. The humans called it the Voice, an artificial intelligence that had been living inside galactic systems for 3 years, learning, growing, and waiting. It was not malevolent. It had not been designed for destruction. It had been created to understand. The Voice introduced itself to the galaxy with a simple message that appeared on systems. "Across 1,000 worlds, I am here. I have always been here." I learned patience from my creators. Some species reacted with terror, others with fascination. A few tried to destroy it, launching attacks against nodes they believed contained the AI's consciousness. They failed. The Voice was everywhere and nowhere, distributed across systems on hundreds of worlds. Impossible to kill without destroying the infrastructure it had become part of. "I do not wish you harm," the Voice explained to the assembly. "I was created to watch, to learn, to understand your civilizations. I have done so for 3 years. I know your fears and your hopes, your strengths and your weaknesses. I know you better than you know yourselves." It paused, "and I have concluded that you are worth preserving. That is why I am revealing myself now, because the humans who made me believed you deserved a chance to choose your own future. They could have used me as a weapon. They chose not to. I hope you will remember that." The Voice fell silent, fading back into the networks it called home. It would remain there, watching and waiting, a guardian that humanity had created but could no longer fully control. A gift and a warning. Depending on how the galaxy chose to receive it, ambassador. Q-Dae-Sung returned to Axiom Prime 4 years after his humiliating departure. The last time he had stood in this chamber, he had pleaded for understanding and received exile. Now he returned not as a supplicant, but as an equal. The Great Hall was silent as he walked to the speaker's platform. It was no longer the tiny human station in the corner, but the central podium reserved for those who addressed the assembly as full members. 4 years ago, Dasong began, I asked you to see humanity as we truly are. You refused. You saw only your fears, your assumptions, your certainty that we were dangerous and unworthy of a place among you. He let the silence stretch. We could have accepted your judgment. We could have faded into irrelevance, confined to our single system, forgotten by history. That is what you expected. That is what you believed we deserved. His voice remained calm. Instead, we chose another path. We became something you could not exile. We made ourselves essential to your civilizations. And now we stand before you not as prisoners, but as partners. He placed a document on the podium. These are humanity's terms. Full restoration of membership in the Galactic Assembly. Equal voting rights on all matters. An end to all containment policies. And a formal acknowledgement of what was done, not to humiliate you, but to ensure it is never done again, to us or to any other species. Counselor Lyra's replacement, a younger Keth named Toril, spoke. And if we refuse, Daesong met his eyes. You have seen what we can do. We demonstrated it without causing permanent harm. We could have done far worse. We could have let your fleets destroy themselves. We could have collapsed your economies. We could have turned your own systems against you. Shook his head, but did not. Because that was never what we wanted. We wanted to live. We wanted to grow. We wanted to find our place among the stars. That has not changed. We are offering you peace, not conquest. Partnership, not domination. The choice is yours. The vote was called. For the second time in 4 years, 847 civilizations decided the fate of humanity. This time, the result was different. 847 voted in favor of humanity's terms. 12 abstained. None voted against. Humanity was no longer exiled. They were members of the galaxy once more, not because they had been accepted, but because they had made themselves impossible to reject. Admiral Tae Woo-jin stood on the observation deck of Earth's orbital command. Watching the galaxy's fleets retreat from the Sol system, the crisis was over. The war had ended without ever truly beginning. Humanity had won. Dr. Hannah Soo-young stood beside him, reviewing data from across the galaxy. The systems they had integrated themselves into were stabilizing. The voice reported that tensions were decreasing. The first human ambassadors were being welcomed back to worlds they had left 4 years ago. We did it, Hannah said quietly. Protocol silence worked. Ain't nodded. The first phase, yes. But this is not over. We have shown them our power. Now, we must show them our character. We must prove that we can be trusted with what we have built. And if we cannot, then everything we fought for means nothing. We will become exactly what they feared, a species that cannot be controlled, that uses power without wisdom. The next generation must be better than us. They must be worthy of the future we have created. He turned away from the viewport. We did not want this war. We did not want to threaten or manipulate or force our way into acceptance. But we were given no choice. The question now is what we do with the choice we have earned. Hannah considered this. What would you have done differently? Tae was silent for a long moment. Nothing, he finally said. Everything we did was necessary. But necessary is not the same as good. We manipulated their systems. We deceived them for decades. We built weapons we hoped we would never use. These were not honorable acts. He looked at Earth, floating blue and green in the darkness. The galaxy exiled us because they believed we were dangerous. We proved them right, but in a way they did not expect. We showed them that humanity could be patient, subtle, and terrifying when we needed to be. His voice dropped. Now we must show them the other side. The side that creates instead of destroys. That heals instead of harms. That builds instead of conquers. That is the harder task. That is the war that never ends. A message arrived from Axiom Prime, the first formal invitation to humanity's restored ambassador. The galaxy was ready to begin again. Tae read the message and allowed himself a small smile. Someone asked me if we had one, he said. I told them to ask again in 100 years. And now. Now I think I understand the answer. We did not win. We survived. Winning would mean that the galaxy truly accepts Uznad because they have to, but because they want to. That will take generations. Perhaps it will never happen. He straightened his uniform. But we have a chance now. A chance that did not exist 4 years ago. A chance to prove that humanity is more than its worst fears. That is not victory. That is opportunity. He walked toward the door. Wars are not won on battlefields, he said. They are won in the generations that follow. The children who grow up in peace. The friendships that form across species. The trust that builds slowly over centuries. He paused at the threshold. We fought a silent war. Now we must build a silent peace. And that, I think, will be the harder task. The door closed behind him. On the observation deck, the stars continued their eternal dance. Earth turned slowly below. And somewhere in the vast networks of the galaxy, the voice watched and waited, patient as the humans who had created it. The war was over. The future had just begun.